Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Nintendonauts. My name is Thomas and we had a January full of Nintendo news, the release of Switch 2 editions, a free Donkey Kong Country HD update, overview trailers for Mario Tennis Fever, Super Mario Bros. Wonder and the Virtual Boy. There were also directs for the Mario Galaxy movie and Tomodachi Life. And last but not least, we just got Nintendo's financial report and are about to see a Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase on February 5. Let me summarize briefly. Animal Crossing New Horizons Nintendo Switch 2 edition was released in mid-January. I bought the upgrade and started a new island. 36 hours later, KK Slider gave his concert in my town and I saw the credits. And more importantly, terraforming was unlocked. So now it's really getting started, especially since the hotel has been unlocked for me as well, and I can finally play one of the big new features from the 3.0 update. I've had a lot of fun so far, even though everything still runs at only 30 FPS. It didn't bother me at all while playing, even though I always prefer 60 FPS. The slightly faster loading times and 4K resolution are very nice. And even though New Horizons has a significantly different focus than older Animal Crossing games, I'm having fun and will certainly invest dozens more hours in my island. But I also played a lot of GameCube games via Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack as Nintendo finally released Fire Emblem Path of Radiance on it. And yes, I played through it, and if you're a Fire Emblem fan or want to become one, you can treat yourself to this game. eBay prices have been beyond good and evil for years, with the game often fetching $200, $300. Now you can play it in HD on Switch 2, perhaps with a CRT filter or GameCube controller. There's hardly anything better. However, don't forget that the game is over 20 years old. You can tell by the graphics, the long battle animations, and the way the story is told. I mean, the story is one of the better ones in the series, but you have to read a lot. Since the game is one of my favorites, but it's only part one of a two-part series, I started playing the sequel, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, on the Wii. Retail prices on eBay are similarly absurd, but I've owned the game for a very long time, and since the game is significantly longer and new games are coming up soon, I don't know when I'll finish it, but hopefully sometime before Fire Emblem Fortune's Reef. I could maybe do an episode on Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn later. In January 2025, Nintendo released Donkey Kong Country Returns HD and received significant criticism. Whether it was because the remaster cost $60, because some graphic effects were missing, or because the co-op gameplay was worsened, as both players could no longer jump on an enemy one after the other, meaning that some jumping passages in the game no longer worked in co-op. I still had fun though, because I just wanted to play one of my favorite games in HD and without motion controls. But out of nowhere, Nintendo released a free update on January 21 that at least solved the co-op problem and brought back some of the graphical effects. It also added Dixie Kong and the new Turbo mode, and as if that weren't enough, loading times were nearly halved on Switch 2, and the game runs in 4K at 60 FPS, at least on a Switch 2. So I started a new game and played through the HD remaster in 4K. I also used Dixie Kong instead of Diddy Kong the whole time, and what can I say? For me, this version is now the ultimate version of the game. all the content of the Wii and 3DS version with normal controls, normal controller controls in 4K 60 FPS, co-op issues fixed, plus Dixie Kong and a new mode. Well, I'm perfectly happy. Okay, the cutscenes haven't been re-rendered, so if you have Dixie on your team and a cutscene follows, you'll see Diddy there. And with the ponytail propellers, Dixie can jump higher and glide further, making her a little overpowered, but she already was in Tropical Freeze. I can hardly believe that this character has now been ported from Tropical Freeze to Returns. Wouldn't this be a good time to release a 4K version of Tropical Freeze, don't you think? No, let's move on to the overview trailers. Nintendo has also held a preview event giving us even more information about Mario Tennis Fever and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. First up is Mario Tennis Fever, which will be released exclusively for Switch 2 on February 12th. The preview reports and videos are very positive, but they refer exclusively to the multiplayer mode because the single-player adventure mode was not playable. But everything else sounds promising. This time there are 38 playable characters, in addition to familiar faces such as Mario, Peach, and Yoshi. There are also new characters such as Piranha Plant, Baby Wario, and Baby Waluigi. Each character has its own strengths, from all-rounders to defensive and fast types to tricky specialists. The character can be combined with the various fever rackets as you wish, allowing you to further enhance their strength. These fever rackets are the game's big innovation. With every rally, the fever bar fills up. Once it is full, a fever shot can be triggered, the effect of which depends on the racket selected. A total of 30 different fever rackets are available. The effects range from freezing or burning the court to creating slippery bananas and causing Pookies to appear on the playing field. However, fever shots can also be countered. If this is done in time, the effect is played back directly to the opponent. If the defense fails, the character loses life energy. Otherwise, it remains a Mario Tennis game, of course. With simply button commands, you can control the ball's direction and execute shots such as lobs, slices, or stubs. Some preview reports note that Mario Tennis Fever strikes a balance between tennis and party games with gimmicks. Recently, the series has relied too heavily on character-specific attacks, many of which were also overpowered. Nintendo seems to have found a good mix this time around, and unlike various other Mario sports games, the range of modes and characters seem just right this time. Now, all that's left is for the adventure mode to be more than just a better tutorial. I'm still unsure about Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 edition and Meet Up in Bella Bell Park. What a title. Sure, experiencing the game in 4K is a dream come true. However, this is a paid update. Owners of the original can upgrade for $20. Everyone else pays $80 for the complete package. We are familiar with this method in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I found the DLC quite worthwhile. In Mario Party Jamboree, on the other hand, I didn't, especially since the main game didn't receive a graphics update. And in Mario Wonder, the focus is clearly on the multiplayer mini-games. There are co-op and competitive challenges. Sometimes you have to work as a team to get a bomb to the finish line before it explodes, or you have to clear the way for a teammate to reach the finish line, or you turn into a flower and try to hide from the other players. But there are also mini games where you have to draw something with the mouse function. For example, platforms for your fellow players, so they can reach the finish line. It all looks nice and varied. So if you like playing with a few friends on the sofa, it could be really fun to try out this 70 mini games. It all feels a bit more like Mario Party. But I would like to know exactly what the single-player mode with the 7 Koopa Links will look like. Apparently, they appear in existing levels, so are these just remixes of the old levels in which you can try to snatch the Bella Bell flowers from the Koopa Links, or are there also new levels? At least there's a new playable character in Rosalina, and thanks to the help mode in which you can't take damage or fall off cliffs, even inexperienced or very young players can finally play through the game. We find out if the extra cost is worth it on March 26, when the game is released. Let's move on to the Virtual Boy. The accessory will be available from February 17. You can choose between a plastic replica of the Virtual Boy for $100 and a cardboard holder for $25. Insert your Switch 2 into these holders, look at the screen through the lens, and enjoy the 3D effect. Since the plastic case is only a replica with non-functional buttons, all settings are made through software. Games are available via Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack subscription, and the following titles will be available right from the start: 3D Tetris, Galactic Pinball, Golf, Red Alarm, Teleroboter, Dimension of Innsmouth, Virtual Boy Wario Land. The following games will be added during the course of the year: D-Hopper, Jack Bros, Mario Clash, Mario's Tennis, Space Invaders Virtual Collection, Wii Tetris, Vertical Force, Virtual Bowling, Zero Racers. The interesting thing is that The Hopper and Zero Racers were never released in 1995 when the Virtual Boy was still current. Nintendo quickly realized the handheld was a flop and shifted its focus to the N64. This is one of the reasons why Europe never got a Virtual Boy. It's a welcome surprise that Nintendo is now making the previously unreleased games available. It's also nice that you can adjust the filter color throughout the year, so you can use colors other than red. Yeah, it's fine. I'm looking forward to it, and I bought the plastic one. I don't have much to say about the Mario Galaxy movie, except that I really liked the new trailer. Yoshi was introduced perfectly, and I also liked the sheer number of Mario Bros. 2 characters. Mauser was there, as was Birdo, plus the desert location from Mario Odyssey. Somehow the only thing missing was Mario Galaxy, so I'm very excited what a wild mix it's gonna to be. The movie will be in theaters starting April 1st. So let's move on to the direct for Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, which I found surprisingly enjoyable. It was just so crazy to see what the Mies got up to, including dating on the Ferris wheel and how plot twist followed like in a bad soap opera. But it's precisely these crazy events that make the game what it is. You create Mies who populate your island and lead their own lives. Each Mii has different needs and preferences. You observe, sometimes intervene, and then observe again. So there's quite a bit of The Sims in the game, just with a Japanese twist and a lot of craziness. What I really liked here is that you can now completely redesign the island through terraforming. You can add decorations or customize house facades. You can even make little cardboard pets, but you can also build stores, houses, and leisure activities. I really like that the island is now available in 3D and can be customized. I can see myself spending many hours there observing and influencing the lives of the Mies, because apparently they can now have children when they fall in love. So it's gonna be a wide ride. And when you have a game in which you can completely change the island and create characters according to your wishes, people tend to abuse it. Inappropriate historical characters are created, or suggestive designs are made. However, Nintendo likes to be in control and has therefore decided to impose a few restrictions. For example, the game will not have any online features for sharing content with other players. This means that you can only share your Miis and items on a local network, so when you are in the same room as the other player. And even Switch features such as sending images to smart devices, direct posting to social media, or for Switch 2, automatic image upload feature will be disabled. Nintendo is simply afraid that people will create politically or socially questionable content in the game and then quickly post it on social media. On the one hand, this is understandable, especially in today's world. On the other hand, the simply exchange of Miis on the 3DS was part of the appeal. You could download Heisenberg from Breaking Bad and other movie characters or celebrities. Now you have to create them all by yourself. Previously, I would have said that the game could become a viral hit, but with these restrictions, I'm not longer sure. I was also surprised that no Switch 2 edition was announced. The mouse function in particular would have been great, and 4K resolution as well. However, both can be added later via a simple free patch for Switch 2 when the game is released on April 16. And Nintendo did something like that with Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, which both also only got a free update, or as I mentioned, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. Those were the most important news stories in January. We also had game releases like Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, which I played through in roughly 30 hours, by the way. Very well done. Basically a good mix of the PS4 and PS5 versions. Very sharp image, full HD docked at 30 FPS. A great port, even if I had to get used to the 30 FPS at first, but it's completely stable, so you get used to it. This is now the third time I've played through the game, PS4 in 2020, PS5 in 2022, and now Switch 2 in 2026. And I didn't enjoy the last two playthroughs quite as much. I think my first playthrough was still steeped in nostalgia. It wasn't until 2022 that I noticed how silly some new characters are. Cue the motorcycle chase, or how bad the backtracking really is when you have to visit a collapsed tunnel at least 3 times, or another boring area twice, including an annoying chase. In addition, the side quests are all fetch quests, and a new area is completely unnecessary because the story sets a certain pace only to then slam on the brakes and go ghost hunting. All of this doesn't make the remake a bad game, but you can tell that developers tried everything they could do to turn a 3 to 5 hour sequence in the original into a 45-hour game. However, I would like to praise some of the character moments, especially at the beginning. There are few characters are given the depths they needed in the original. And the combat system is also great. If you haven't played the game yet, you should definitely give it a try. Now let's move on to the big news of the week, the sales figures for the Nintendo Switch 2. Apparently, there is a trend among various YouTubers and content creators to want to see the Switch 2 fail. Negative clicks bring in the money. That's why I'm kind of glad I don't have to make money with this podcast. So many videos and articles about supposedly disappointing sales figures, but on February 3, Nintendo finally released its sales figures for the Christmas quarter, and we can stop speculating. Even after 7 months, the Nintendo Switch is still the fastest selling Nintendo console of all time. 70.37 million Switch 2 consoles were sold worldwide by December 31, 2025. Nintendo aims to sell 90 million Switch 2 units in the fiscal year ending March 31, 2026. This should be a formality. After the first year of the Switch 2, there are expected to be over 20 million consoles in circulations around the world, which would be enormous in today's economic climate. By comparison, the PS5 has sold 17.3 million units after its first year, roughly the same as the Switch 2 after 7 months. The PS4 sold 20.2 million units, and the Switch 2 will likely surpass that. The Xbox Series X and S sold around 12 million consoles, while the Nintendo Switch sold 17.8 million in its first year. Things are looking pretty good for the Switch 2 at the moment, and it's crazy to consider that the Wii U sold only 30.56 million units in 5 years, while the GameCube sold 21.74 million units in 6 years. The Wii U has been overtaken, and the GameCube will be overtaken by the Switch 2 after about a year. But the Nintendo Switch is still selling well too. It sold 3.25 million units in 2025, bringing the total to 155.37 million units. This means the Switch has overtaken the Nintendo DS as Nintendo's best-selling hardware to date. The Nintendo DS sold 155.02 million units. Whether the PS2 with 160 million sales can ever be overtaken depends on how long the Switch 1 continues to be produced. If Nintendo soon focuses solely on Switch 2 and discontinues Switch 1 production in 2027, it is unlikely to surpass the PS2. If Nintendo sees Switch 1 as a cheaper entry point and sells the console until 2028, this could happen. There have also been some changes in software sales figures. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold over 1 million copies, which is a decline. On the other hand, this is not surprising, as its successor has already been released. Nevertheless, it was enough to break the 70 million mark, and I remember how Nintendo was criticized in 2017 for releasing this Wii U port at full price, and now it's 2026 and the game has sold 70.59 million copies. Animal Crossing New Horizons stands at 49.32 million units. It is therefore very likely to break the 15 million mark this year. Super Mario Odyssey sold 30.27 million copies. This is a new milestone, making it not only by far the best-selling 3D Mario game, but also the best-selling 3D platformer of all time. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet have now sold 28 1.08 million units, coming remarkably close to the first generation of Pokemon games. Red and Blue sold 31.38 million copies at the time. And don't forget that all DS and 3DS Pokemon games sold between 9, 10 and 18 million copies. Let's move on to the Switch 2 games. Mario Kart World is the best-selling Switch 2 game with 14.03 million copies sold. This includes the hardware bundle, of course. It will be interesting to see how sales figures develop without the hardware bundle. Donkey Kong Bonanza ranks second with 4.75 million units sold, and some people are now using this figure as negative headline news, which is pretty laughable when you consider that hardly any 3D platformers sell more than 5 or 10 million copies unless they are Mario games. Sonic Frontiers sold 4.57 million copies across all platforms, taking 3 years to do so. So 4.25 million on just one platform for Donkey Kong after 7 months isn't too bad, right? Astrobot won Game of the Year, but it hasn't sold over 3 million copies. The last official figure was 1.5 million, and analysts estimated sales at 2.3 million last year. Pokemon Legends ZA Nintendo Switch 2 edition sold 3.89 million copies. Pokemon Legends ZA sold 8.41 million copies on the Switch. Together, that's 12.3 million copies. That's slightly less than Pokemon Legends Arceus sold in the same period, which sold 12.6 million copies, but didn't have the Christmas season to boost sales. So the game may have underperformed somewhat, even though most game series would sell their souls for these sales figures. However, two questions come to my mind. How exactly is the split between Switch 1 and Switch 2, and how long will ZA continue to sell well? Let's move on to the first question. You're probably wondering, Thomas, you mentioned the sales figure, so you have your split between Switch 1 and Switch 2. Yeah, that's not entirely true, because Nintendo counts the Nintendo Switch 2 edition slightly differently. If you buy the Nintendo Switch 2 edition as a retail game, it counts as a Switch 2 sale. But if you buy it in the eShop, it counts as a Switch 1 purchase, because technically it's just the Switch 1 game with an upgrade pack. So in total, more than 3.89 million people have bought the Switch 2 version, but it's counted as Switch 1 sales. We will find about longevity soon. By the end of February, it should be clear whether we will see Pokemon Generation 10 this fall, and a brand new Pokemon would significantly reduce the sales potential of Legends ZA. Kirby Air Raiders sold 1.76 million copies, surpassing Kirby Air Ride on the GameCube, which sold 1.35 million copies. I am pleasantly surprised that the game achieved these figures. It became clear very early on that it was a real hit and a system seller in Japan. It has now even overtaken a Donkey Kong Bonanza there. However, I didn't see much sales potential in the rest of the world, as the game is very niche. Although Japan is the largest market, the game sold 900,000 copies there last year and 860,000 copies elsewhere, so it will also break the 2 million mark easily. Maybe 3 million is the long-term goal. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment has also sold over 1 million copies, according to Koei Tecmo, which is a very, very good result for a Warriors game. This makes it the second most successful Hyrule Warriors game. The original Hyrule Warriors for the Wii U had also sold 1 million copies. Hyrule Warriors Legends for 3DS achieved 419,000 sales, and Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition for Switch sold 460k copies. Only Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity has sold 4 million copies. So it will be interesting to see whether Age of Imprisonment can close the gap somewhat in the long term. But that's the current status of Switch 2. Record sales for hardware and now a handful of million sellers on the software side. More sales are good for us as gamers, as the chances of new games in a series are higher. That's why it's a shame that Metroid Prime 4 sold less than 1 million copies on Switch or Switch 2 in its first month. Nintendo only publishes figures for sales of 1 million or more, so the next quarterly report will be interesting to see whether Metroid Prime 4 appears there or not. Metroid is generally a series that never sells particularly well. Don't forget that Metroid Dread is the best-selling Metroid game with roughly 3 million units sold, and while Metroid Prime sold 2.84 million copies on GameCube, all other Metroid Prime games sold less than 1.5 million copies each. Metroid Prime 4 will not stop this trend either. Therefore, it will be interesting to see how the Prime series continues. Reviews below expectations and probably sales as well. Add to that the bad word of mouth and all that with the much too long development time. So things aren't looking good for Metroid Prime, but on the other hand, Nintendo has always kept the Metroid games in its lineup, as it's one of the few dark Nintendo series that appeals to its specific clientele. And I still think it's likely that Retro Studios will be allowed to work on Metroid Prime 5 now that they've focused the studio's pipeline and the engine is ready and all the technical stuff. Since Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will also be Kensuke Tanabe's last game, the baton will be passed on to Raiza Tabata. After 40 years at Nintendo, that's understandable, but I might want to discuss that in a separate episode. Otherwise, let's be happy about strong hardware sales because they ensure better third-party support, and we will have a partner showcase this week. And Capcom is showing right now with the good ports of Resident Evil Requiem and Pragmata that there are still some great games ahead of us. And so I'll end this episode with a quote from Matt Piscatella. If only all console manufacturers could be this doomed or have lost momentum like this. Over 70 million in just the first calendar year is an unreal total. With this in mind, until next time, yours Thomas.